Hello and welcome to this really exciting webinar. This webinar is on Restoration International. I'm Gideon. We're going to be doing a panel discussion between three of our volunteers, and I'm going to just be moderating the panel discussion. I'm 17, I'm from England, and I'm part of Worldward. I'm now going to open it up to the panelists to just give a brief introduction of who they are. And I'm going to start with Hannah. I've unmuted you now, Hannah.
Yep. Hi, I'm Hannah. I am also 17 and also from England. I joined Worldward as I believe that climate change and climate restoration is an issue that everyone should support and advocate about. I think it's important to start the discussion because the more people that promote climate action, the better chance we have of achieving a safer climate. Restoration is so important because mitigation alone isn't going to cover it. So I just think it's an important issue for everyone to be interested in.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Hannah. I'm now going to ask Reese to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, I'm Reese. I'm from South Africa, Cape Town. I've done a lot of work in humanitarian work. I have my own organization, and I found out about Worldward once I met Gideon on an online summit, online conference. Yeah, and it's an incredible organization, and I think you should all hear about it now, and I'm very excited for this webinar.
And finally, and by no means least, Paula. I've unmuted you.
Hi, I'm Paula. I'm from Mexico. I'm 20 years old. And I think this is a very important topic because it's a topic that concerns everyone, that is super, well, important for everyone in the sense that no matter what country you live in, you have to worry about it. And actually, like, the carbon everywhere is spread. So if someone starts with over pollution and over I was gonna say a word in Spanish, but it's not gonna work. Over pollution in one country, it's going to affect everyone. So yeah, that's why I'm here, and I think this is very important.
Thank you very much. And so I'm now just going to give a brief introduction before we start this webinar on Restoration International. I'm going to give a brief introduction for those of you who don't know on what climate restoration is. Climate restoration is the idea that Worldward as an organization, which is the organization which me and the other speakers all are volunteers for, is dedicated towards achieving. And essentially, it's the idea that achieving net zero, so taking our carbon emissions to zero, is not enough. Achieving just keeping our climate from warming under 1.5 degrees is not enough. Because what that will do is that will just stop it getting worse. And it's already so bad today, as some of the panelists will go on to talk about, that actually it's unacceptable for millions of people who will be suffering and dying for centuries to come if we just achieve net zero, if we just stop it making it worse. Bear in mind, achieving net zero, cutting emissions to zero, is what all the major climate movements are going towards at the moment. But we say let's move one step further than that, and let's actively remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to actually not just stop carbon, not just stop it getting worse, but actively make it better. Because the carbon builds up in the atmosphere and it stays there. Imagine like you're filling a bath. So you can't just switch off the taps. You also have to actively remove water from the bath as well. It's the same as the atmosphere. Not only do we have to stop putting carbon in, but that carbon is going to stay there once we've stopped putting it in. There's still going to be carbon left, so much CO2 left. So we also have to remove that CO2 as well and store it underground to help not just make the temperature, stop it getting warmer, but actively also start to restore and repair the climate we've broken. So that's a kind of brief introduction into what restoration is. And now I'm going to ask my first question to the speakers. By the way, after they finish Whilst we finished our panel discussion, there will be time for audience questions. And I'm going to start by asking Reese about what's the kind of state of climate and the state of climate action in your country and in your context. I'm now unmuting you now.
Yeah, so in South Africa, we've been facing a lot of climate disasters. About 2017, 2018, we faced a huge drought in the south of the country. One of our major cities, Cape Town, the one I live in actually, about 4 million people were threatened to have no access to water whatsoever. And at the time, when the drought was at its extremist, no family was allowed to use more than 50 liters a day. So that really affected everyone in South Africa, despite your economic status or where you live in the south of the country. But then also we've been facing forest fires or veld fires that we call them, which have been exacerbated by the climate crisis, how dry the earth is. And about several people have died over the past few years from uncontrolled fires. Our marine life is falling apart. Our famine and crops are being destroyed. Famine's going up. Yeah, so we're facing a lot of things in our country, and it's sad because we are a developing nation, so we don't always have the means to cope with these stuff. And also as a country, we are quite reliant on industries that that affect the climate. We are very reliant on our coal industry, and that provides a lot of jobs to people in our country. So it's quite difficult to look at that side as well, quite a tricky situation. But we are moving. There is action being taken. There are a lot of youth movements, such as the African Climate Alliance, which is partnered with Fridays for Future and doing a lot of climate striking. So we're acting for the better.
Thank you very much for that, both slightly sobering but also hopeful. Then also at the end, I'd now like to move on to asking Paula the exact same question, kind of the state of climate and climate action in your country and in your context.
Yes, of course. So I want to start with the fact that we have a populist president here in Mexico. So we have different priorities. So basically what a populist president means is that whatever the people want in that exact moment, he's going to say that he's going to do that. And since 4 out of 100 workers in Mexico earn less than 15,429 pesos a month, so that's $625 a month, their priorities are in the first SDGs, which is no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education. We can start to talk about gender equality and clean water and sanitation because of all of the femicides that are happening, especially during these times with the whole COVID thing. But another thing that really affects our countries, well, our country and also Latin America in general, is that that we have lots of megacities. Megacities are cities with more than 10 million people. This means that there's an extreme industrialization, and actually Mexico City is the 5th most populated city in the world. So we have 21.5 million people just in that city. So that's as if we were 2 megacities together. So it's extremely populated and industrialized. So I wanted to show you a couple of graphs really quickly. So I'm just going to share my screen. I can't do that yet.
Now you can.
I can share my screen now. So in this first graph, which is loading, we can see how all the big purple dots are the megacities, and then 5 million to 10 million people, and well, considering like the size of the dot. So if you see in Latin America, we do have a lot of megacities, but we see what it's expected in 10 years, it's just incredible. It's another level of population and industrialization, and therefore more carbon. So here's what I already mentioned. We have Mexico City here, and we also have São Paulo in Brazil, which is also in Latin America. And we'll, thankfully, if we see the changes, well, hopefully Mexico City and São Paulo are going to go down the list. Here we can also see the megacities and the ones that are expected in 2030, just the megacities, so it's a cleaner graph, which is really worrying. But at least in our continent, we're not planning on having more megacities. We just have the ones that we have right now, which is a positive point. And here we can see it in a different way, because if we see Latin America and the Caribbean, we see that the megacities aren't going to increase, but the big cities are going to increase. So even though Mexico City, Monterrey, and city or Guadalajara aren't going to increase in size that much, or there are going to be other cities that are going to join us, there are still going to be more cities that are going to join the next level. And here we see the risk of disasters. So in Latin America, we can see that there's lots of risks of disasters, but it's only not only one, just it could also be 2 or 3, which are, well, like if you see Mexico, it's a lot. And also all the coastal areas of Latin America. And yeah, that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Paula, for that really interesting and different look at the kind of state of climate and state of really the world at the moment, which I think is really important. And I'm finally going to end off this question by asking the exact same question to Hannah as well.
Yeah. So in the UK, we're quite a fortunate country in the fact that a lot of the effects of climate change we don't see in having hugely negative impacts. You can see an increase in flooding and an increase in temperatures, however, they aren't fatally increases, and so we don't see the worst impacts. The problem in the UK is there's a lot of talk of discussions and what we can do. However, at the moment, there's not as much action being taken by the government and by the country. So we've got a lot of discussions and proposals about technologies, and there's the public are really on board with climate, like getting the climate to a safer place, including restoration, which is all well and good, but at the moment the action's not there as much. Some of the action that is happening, however, is the government have said that they are going to aim for net zero by 2050, which, despite actually being an unrealistic target, because it's probably not obtainable and won't get us to a safe level, they are actually promising to do something, which is what we need. They've also started tree planting programs, which again are great because they are a restoration method, so they are actually actively removing carbon from the atmosphere, which is exactly what we need. They have also noted that it is necessary for us to have removal methods in order to reach net zero by their target. And so they are promising to use these removal methods. However, they're not using them for restoration, which is the purpose that we as Worldward would quite like to happen, because we think it's necessary to achieve a safe climate for everyone. Also, in 2017, the UK government had its first removals research programs happening, which shows that as a country, we are actively looking for removals, which is really good as a country and positive for the world in terms of climate change.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that summary of the state of climate action within the United Kingdom. So just before I move on to the next question, I just want to briefly say something about the panelists and the way this is working. Each of the panelists are presenting their own views on most of these matters. Worldward gives its volunteers and its members complete autonomy to their own views, and to push for those. We remain a politically diverse movement and therefore don't have one dogma that people have to stick to. So none of them are kind of parroting the official line of the organization that we're forcing them to say. That's not how this is working. So just on to the next question, which is really why, in your opinion, is climate restoration so important, and why should people want climate restoration? So I'm going to start by asking Reese this question. So please feel free to answer.
Yeah. Okay, so climate restoration, I would say, is specifically important to South Africa because even if we do reduce our carbon emissions and reach net zero, we're still going to have the lasting effect that the climate change has already made on our country. We're still going to be suffering with droughts, obscure weather patterns, and people are going to continue to suffer despite the reduction of emissions. So we really need to try and start recovering the climate in a way, try and get it back to normal. I mean, in order to try and solve these again and get back to rain patterns and all the correct things. Yeah, I mean, that's the situation for South Africa, I guess. As simple as that.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. I think that's a really quite obvious and important reason to most people why we should be carrying out restoration, and really hammers it home. Thank you for that. I'm next going to ask Hannah on her views on why restoration is so important.
So in the UK, a lot of the things that I'm going to say are probably quite similar to Reese, because in the UK, we're not going to experience the worst impacts of climate change. We're lucky in that sense that it just doesn't have the same impact. However, people need to be compassionate and think about the hugely negative impacts that it's going to have on the rest of the world, and not be selfish and only think about the fact that it's not going to hugely impact them. Also, the UK was one of the leaders in getting their industry up with the fossil fuel industry. So it only makes sense that we as a country should lead the way to climate restoration and getting the country back to where it should be. And so it's really important in that sense as well. Also, as a more selfish reason people in the UK should want it is it's going to the public health, because we're going to live in a safer atmosphere, and it will therefore reduce the NHS costs and reduce taxes, which is beneficial for everyone. I think it just makes sense for people, for themselves, and for the people who in countries where they aren't so well off and able to help reduce those emissions and remove the carbon from the atmosphere, that as a country that is wealthy enough, we should do it for the sake of others as well as for ourselves.
Fantastic. I think that's a really fantastic moral reasoning behind restoration. And finally, as I think you're probably expecting, I'm going to ask Paula the same question of why is climate restoration important?
Okay, so first of all, I think we can all agree that it's pretty obvious that, well, our world is what keeps us alive, and carbon is affecting us in various ways, and restoration should be the only way to keep us alive. Specifically in Mexico, we have lots of climate disasters, and the part that I think is unfair is that the countries or the cities that pollute the most are the ones who are less affected by these effects, less affected by these different circumstances. So actually, during these climate disasters, the people who are affected are people in the coastal areas, which are the people in poverty conditions. So I think that that's a very important point, but also we have to consider that everything is a chain reaction. So for example, Mexico is one of the countries with the most biodiversity in the world. Some people say it's the first, some people say it's Brazil, but either way, one of our very important revenue sources is tourism. So if you don't want to see it in the sense that it will affect your health or any of those like reasons, you can see it through the economical aspect because of the tourism. But if we do go through like the other aspect, is that, okay, so this will affect the oceans, this will affect all the sea life, and then by affecting the sea life, there's going to be like holes in the food chain. So then that's going to affect us because there's going to be an overpopulation of some animals and there's going to be extinctions of other animals. And then we're going to be affected in our health because of the air pollution, but also because we don't have the different foods that we're accustomed to. So it's just a chain reaction of different aspects that affect us. That it's not only the health sector, it's basically everything. I can seriously talk about this for ages, but climate change affects, for example, gender equality. So it's something that people don't really think that connects, but it does. Everything is connected because we live in this world where everything is collected.
Fantastic. And I think that's a really important vision of why we need restoration, because of how everything's connected. I think all three of those speeches, certainly for me, have shown why, net zero is not enough. It's obviously essential we achieve net zero, but we have to go beyond that. We have to also look at restoration as well. So my next question, now we've established, I think, that restoration is kind of an essential thing for a lot of what we believe in, is who exactly should be responsible for carrying out restoration, and who should be responsible for being the people that initiate that. So this time I'm going to start with Hannah and just ask you who should be responsible.
So my opinion is, in the UK, the action of climate restoration should be down to the government to mandate and ensure happens. However, I don't think that it's all governmental responsibility, because I think actually the people and the population have a huge responsibility and really this information and spread everything. The government are going to have more reason to want to act, because we live in a democracy where if the people share this and share their reasoning, the government are going to have to listen to the people and climate restoration, which can then help kickstart climate restoration across the world. And I just think that everyone should try and have their say and get involved and try and just spread the word, because I think that's the best way to get an impact.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm now going to ask Paula, who is it who should be responsible for carrying out restoration?
Okay, so I think that there are lots of aspects that need to be taken into account. And I think that it really depends on the country you live in, because it's not the same to talk about a country in Europe who has been a country for over 500 years, and to talk about a country that is an ex-colony, or a country that is part of the ACP countries, which are the countries who got their independence from a colonial state during the 50s to the 70s. So Mexico is not one of those cases because it's for us. We've been independent for 200 years. But for those type of countries, the countries that in the Cotonou Agreement were included, there's actually this agreement that says that the European Union has to take responsibility for their ex-colonies if they're during this period of time. And they signed this contract this agreement that says that they have to worry about zero poverty, sustainable development, and the integration of this country's economy into the world's economy. So I think that that's very important, even though it's being used more like tied aid instead of actual helping. But that's life, right? And but more for Mexico and other countries that aren't in the ACP countries, I think that the government always has to be involved. But if we see it like from a realist point of view, we live in a world where we have to ask for what we want. So we, as a civil society, have to ask the government for whatever we want. So in this case, climate restoration. And so I think that it should be more in that aspect. And for countries that are considered to be countries in a poverty condition, or to have a large amount of people, their population, these countries ask for help through international cooperation for development. But the reality is that it's always tied aid. So tied aid is the fact that I say, okay, I'll give you money, but you have to, during the United Nations meeting that we have next week, you have to vote for this person or for this idea. So I think that it's not a real development. And I think that real international cooperation for development is more technical assistance. So it's teaching a country how to fish, not to give them the fish. There are different levels of donations and cooperation, which I won't go into, but I think that the most important part is to give them opportunities, these countries opportunities to innovate. So that is SDG 9. And I think that with this technology and with this technical help, it will be a lot better than simply giving different resources, which obviously if it's a natural disaster or anything, yes, you need that. But in the long term, in the actual development, I think that the important part is the opportunities to innovate. And also not only the government to give these opportunities or other governments to give these opportunities, but also to everyone together to try as a civil society to try to think about this option and to think about social innovation or social or innovative and entrepreneurship. And yeah, I think that's.
So if you don't mind me asking a quick follow-up question for that really kind of fascinating speech, do you think that restoration can play a role in being that innovation and actually in a global cooperation towards restoration can help bring innovation to countries which, because of the sad past that has happened in this world, have not quite managed to integrate into the global economy as well as other countries have? Do you think restoration can play a role in that economic development?
Yes, of course. I think that that this is just one of the different types of ideas and innovation and technologies that can help, because okay, yes, it can help in development during or throughout climate restoration, but these ideas can also like open up your mind to new opportunities in order to help in other aspects too. But yeah, so it's just to try to include this idea into the different economic propositions, but also the business models that different companies will use.
Fantastic. And I think it's really interesting and fascinating to get some insight into the ways that development and restoration could strongly interact, and actually restoration could be a force not just for good, in that it reverses one of the greatest dilemmas of our entire generation, which is that of climate change, but also helps to combat another one, which is obviously poverty and development. So
Yeah, but
Karen?
no, it's just that I just wanted to like make clear that climate restoration is part of development, because development is trying to improve the way of life. So it's one of the different themes inside development, and they're not separate, they're just together. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I'm going to ask Reese to finish off. If you need a reminder of the question, it's who should be responsible for initiating restoration?
Yeah, so in terms of Africa, definitely adding on to what Paula said, restoration should become its own initiative, its own industry, built up, its own development project, which then could potentially provide jobs to many Africans and help their own economies, especially because the situations that Africans have been left in due to colonization, which I could talk about all day, but that's a different story. But we've basically been left in a situation where we have these industries where we're exploiting our own natural resources to trade with foreign countries that aren't our own. So essentially, such as South Africa, we're giving a lot of our coal to overseas nations. Wait, can you guys see me?
Yeah.
Sorry, my screen went completely black. Okay, I'll try and carry on. Yeah, so, and countries such as Egypt, which are very involved in oil, and it's quite hard to think of a way that these companies can just sort of fall, that we can stop manufacturing coal and oil, because they create so many job opportunities, and a lot of our economy is actually based off these industries. So if we were completely to turn our back away from them without any sort of thing to replace it, like climate restoration, I mean, our countries would go even more down the drain, which is very sad, because it's not even our fault as Africa. And that also then pays into the responsibilities of colonial nations, which are doing quite well at the moment, and how they have a responsibility now to initiate this climate restoration, because not only are they economically powerful to do so, but also they could start paying reparations for the lots of injustices they have caused. Yeah, so I think definitely should be started as a new development project in places such as Africa, but it can be initiated by European nations and nations that have the economy to start experimenting and exploring those sectors.
Thank you very, very, very much. That was a really fascinating response. Just reminding people, members of the audience, I think there's 2 more questions before you get the audience, you'll get a chance to ask some questions. So just kind of prepare those if you want, and you can start putting them in the chat because we'll start picking on them soon. But the next question we've got is, we've spoken obviously about, and actually I think some of you touched on this question already, we've spoken about who we think should be responsible for it. My question is how can we, as citizens, as members of civil society, as most of us are probably young people, as members of organisations like Worldward, how can we help to bring about climate restoration? How can we make these people who should be responsible for climate restoration actually carry it out? Sorry to go back to you so soon, but I think I'll let Reese start off this answer.
That's fine. I think definitely a way to start it is to create awareness and make people more aware of it. Once people are aware of the initiative and the project of climate restoration, Perhaps people can even start boycotting things that create carbon emissions if they can. And then that would create a demand for options that don't create carbon emissions, and then create a demand for projects that involve climate restoration. And once people can see that climate restoration can be its own development project, its own initiative with a greater demand, then that would create uh, uh, ideas and initiatives for companies to start those projects. So I definitely think we should start the conversation amongst just the general public. Yeah, and like they say on the chat, social media is a good idea to spread it amongst ourselves. Yeah, I think us as youth have an important role. We have a big voice in society, so we should definitely start talking about it and putting it out there.
Fantastic. I'm now going to move on to Paula. Your response to the question.
Yeah. So I think that, as I already mentioned, I can't talk right now. As I already mentioned, we have to demand for our rights to the government. So I think that that is a very important point, but also the innovation thing that I was talking about, in the sense that we should think about more alternative technologies, because if there are already different technologies, but if they aren't as popular as they should be, it's because of something. Maybe we don't know what it is, maybe we do, but if I don't know, if solar energy or wind energy was actually that profitable or that manageable or that easy to manufacture, then everyone would be using it if it were cheaper and everything. So I think that that's why we have to think about new alternative technologies through innovation. And so we can also have a different, so we can also have like a choice, because that's part of the whole capitalist thing, no? We have to have a choice to like what type of energy to use, what type of company to use. So I think that that is very important, but most of all, within these alternative technologies, they have to be accessible for everyone. So yes, you can think, okay, yeah, accessible, yes, of course, but it's not that simple. There's different aspects in the term accessibility. So it's, for example, the closeness to the producer. So for example, okay, maybe there's this solar energy company, but it's in the other side of the city, so they don't come here and install panels. So that's not accessible. Also, easy to ask. There are some companies that have a lot of conditions, so if you don't have a certain type of roof, they're not going to install those panels. Or maybe you just don't know where the telephone number is, or you don't know of the company. And then the last point would be the accessibility, in the sense of that you are able to pay for it. So going back to what I was mentioning before, 96% of the people in Mexico live under $600 a month. So if the electricity is already difficult thing to talk about and to have, if it's more expensive, they're not going to buy for it. They're not going to buy it, sorry. And but a point that we can do as civilians or people that aren't experts in technologies is to vote with your wallets. So if supply demand line, sorry. So if we start boycotting certain technologies and start using others, well, you vote with your wallet, and then that means that the statistics are going to show that there's a boom in renewable energies, and then people who want to start a new company are going to say, hey, look, this is starting to have a boom. Let's try to think about something there, or start a company there within a technology that already exists, or invest in different scientists or engineers that can think about different technologies. So there are lots of creative ways that that even students are thinking about, and then they're going with experts to help them do the technical part or the engineering part. But I think that it's a big step to think about it in that way.
And I guess that idea of the kind of voting with your wallet could also be extended to restoration itself as well. Just some news for anyone who's not been avidly following restoration news, which I assume is most people in the world, that there's a company called Stripe, which are just a kind of website e-commerce company, but as part of their social justice side of the company, they've actually pledged to invest 2% of their company profits in restoration techniques every single year. That's also an idea of the positive voting with your wallet as well. Even to companies that aren't necessarily in this area, if they're starting to do things like that, and many more companies have pledged, although they just announced their projects they're actively doing, I think yesterday, it can also show the work that other organizations we might not expect might be able to do. And I'm finally going to open up the question to Hannah. Really on how can we help bring about climate restoration?
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Okay, so personally, I think the first step to bringing about restoration is to get people thinking about it and talking about it, because climate restoration is logical. It makes sense. Like, it's not a debate of it as in, is it a good thing? Because it's logically, it makes sense to restore. The problem governments and places have with it are there isn't the popularity, or they don't have enough information, or the technology is not there yet. And so if we can get people thinking about it and discussing it, we can get more public support and then pressure that government action that we really need. Another part of that is the science and technology. So the scientists really need to become involved, and engineers need to be researching these technologies. Because if they can research them and develop them so that they become more affordable, we're a lot more likely to get the action that we want. Also, through organizations like Worldward, we are able to educate anyone who's interested in the climate, in climate action, and just get the message out there and get the government to have to respond to it. Because in the UK, we live in a democracy. It's not a case of the people want something and the government will just ignore it. The government have a responsibility to listen to what the people want. So I think it's really important to just get people to think about it. And it may seem really useless. However, the whole thing about actually getting the government to declare that they were going to reach net zero and to declare climate change a national emergency was through people saying that and through people presenting their views. And so if they can do that for that step, why can't we go one step further and show them that we think this is necessary and that we think restoration is necessary, and get them to consider actually having more action?
Fantastic. So I'm now going to just like to obviously, there will be obviously Karen speaking, but I'd just like to thank the speakers for their answers to my first half questions. They'll be having one more question from me right at the end to end off. But first, I'd like to open up to questions from all of you. Either put up your hand, so there's a put up your hand function, or type it in the chat, and then you can ask a question either to any one of the panelists, or if you want to know anything specifically about the organisation that they might not know, I can also assist in answering those questions. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat, or raise a hand, really. So that's whilst people are waiting for their questions, I'll just give kind of a brief summary of, oh, I think we've got a question. We've got a question. Fantastic. So the question is, do you have a comprehensive plan going forward for the progression of this movement? Do any of our three panelists want to answer that question?
I could say something.
Fantastic.
I think what's so amazing about the Worldward movement is that it's very youth involved and very volunteer involved. So if you were to get involved, you would have a very big voice and be able to open a discussion about the ways in which you wanted to go forward and the views that you have. I think at the moment, restoration's sort of the goal, and we're trying to find all the ways we can encourage that and create advocacy for that. So really, any ideas that come up, it's an option.
And do either of the two other panelists have an answer to this question? Or because I did just realize I'd actually forgot to ask them one more of the questions that I'd come up with. So I'll just ask that question before we move back to audience questions. I did only have one job, which was making sure all the questions got asked, and I did fail at it. Apologies. So we will get to all the questions that people have been already covered and keep them coming. But my question is, which is actually quite a substantial question, and I don't know why I forgot it, is to the panelists, what would restoration look like in your country and context? And I'm going to ask Paula to open up the discussion here.
Okay, so I think we've talked a lot about social innovation, but I think that that this could be seen in my country or in my continent or Latin America, because continents in America like are divided weirdly depending on where you live. But anyways, so I think that it could be a lot about a solidarity. I think that this social innovation should be born from this, from an interest and motivation to do something about the problems that we see every day, because we're born into this context and we see it as something normal, but we really shouldn't, and we should start thinking about this solidarity and therefore not just because obviously we also have to earn money to eat and everything, but through social innovation we can think about solving different necessities for different people and still making a profit out of it. It doesn't necessarily have to be an NGO or all donations or stuff like that. It could seriously be I don't know, for example, I have a friend who made this cookie that they said that, well, this company now sells, which is sold depending on, like the price is sold to you depending on what your, well, how much money you have. So it could be something like a weird business model like that. And this cookie actually helps for people who have, I don't remember how it's called in English, but I think it's anemia. So so people who don't have enough nutrients in their body, they eat this cookie and it's full with this. So you don't have to eat that much in order to get your nutrients and not starve. So yes, that is a problem not only for people in poverty conditions, but for everyone, because there are people who have certain diseases that that they need extra nutrients. So with this cookie, they're helping a social problematic, but they're also making a living out of it. So I think that it's this interest and motivation to do something through solidarity. Another aspect is the consciousness that I think we've also really talked about, and something that I believe that could really help in this country and in this context are the green bonds that the World Bank has started. It's specifically a loan for only ecological aspects. So the World Bank will lend you money for different projects that aren't yeah, these loans can be given to different governments or companies. So for example, you can be a company and have different projects in order to help these aspects, but you can also say, okay, I want to use this loan to make my company carbon free. So I think that that's a very good opportunity that we should all take, not only my country, but I think that it's a very good opportunity. And it's also an opportunity for investors to now lend money strictly for these types of projects. So for example, you can be the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and set a certain amount of your money to these green bonds that you know that your money is going to be invested specifically for ecological aspects. So I think that our country and our context and our continent would take these three principal aspects into consideration if we saw what restoration was.
So do you think that we can use these existing international institutions and international mechanisms to carry out restoration, or do you think we also need to strengthen them as well and make new ones as well to help drive restoration?
I think that obviously this is a start, but if there's a high demand in these different organizations, and we could also talk about the UNIS Foundation, that that lends microcredits to different small businesses, micro businesses, and if they're being asked for too much money, then it's going to be on the news, and then there's going to be people who will look at the innovative aspect and start to make their own different types of mechanisms that can also work, or just increase the number of mechanisms, or donate more money, or invest more money. And yeah, so look at it in the World Bank aspect, the social innovation aspect, and the governmental and personal aspect.
Fantastic. I'm now going to ask Reese on how he views restoration could be carried out in his country and context.
So I'm a very simple person. I come from quite a simple community. So I look at lots of things from the grassroots perspective. And in terms of grassroots, to sort of make restoration possible or play your part, I think one of the simplest things to do is actually just plant a tree. I mean, it really does regulate carbon and it's great for the environment. And I think a continent like Africa, where we have so many different types of flora and different plants, I think just planting a tree in your community is such a good idea. And it's something that can be possible amongst all communities. So I think, something as small as that. There's a lot of organizations already doing a lot of work in Africa for tree planting, like Green Hope and Green Pop. Yeah.
Fantastic. Obviously, there's a lot of other solutions, which actually we're going to have various people talk about as the last question. But tree planting is definitely a fantastic start. And finally, Hannah, what would climate restoration look like in your country?
So I think that in the UK, the largest role initially would probably be in developing technologies, because obviously there are a lot of technologies that are needed for the various different techniques of achieving restoration. So as a country who has been proven to be good at developing technologies and have the knowledge, I think it would be a really key, important way for the UK to be involved in kickstarting restoration. Because obviously you've got techniques like direct air capture, BECCS, enhanced weathering, which all require more development in how they're carried out, and to ensure that they're able to be funded well enough that it's a reasonable aim for us to achieve. So I think that's really important. The UK, again, has the research department is really good in the UK, and so I think it's just a great way for the UK to be involved initially as especially as it's got the funding to do things like this.
Fantastic. And that actually this time, except for the last question, which is how we'll end it off after the audience question, that actually ends off the questions from me, and now moves on to the questions from the audience. So the first question is one from Stanley, and he says that knowledge on climate change in some parts of Africa is very low. What will you suggest we do to raise the awareness? Which one of you three would like to answer that?
I would love to take that question. Being from Africa, I do recognize that a lot of people aren't very aware of climate change. I've actually started my own project to try and make children specifically more aware about the environment and the climate. And I find that even just through conversation, it creates, it at least opens a conversation for people to want more knowledge and then build on their knowledge of climate change. I mean, it's definitely not a priority for a lot of people in Africa, as it shouldn't be, because if you're worrying about your next meal, why should you have to worry about the state of the earth in 5 years? I mean, it is a very important thing, and I think entertainment industries, especially in Africa, have a role in this. A lot of the radio stations and TV stations play a huge part in African culture. And if we can raise our activism to levels with as much exposure as that, and just get the word out there and start the conversation, it can really interest some people. And then just even if people become physically aware of it, that's already a start.
Fantastic. And I also guess that's one of the purposes of webinars like these, which have people from all over the world, to educate not just about climate change in general, but also about restoration in specific. And I think we've managed to do both over this webinar. By the way, everyone who's in the audience, you can keep asking questions. We will get through the entire list, or at least as far as we can. Then we've got more of a statement, but I guess if anyone wants to comment on the statement from Albert, you can. It says that he believes that what's important at this moment is that government and its people should both involved on this very important matter of restoration, inclusivity, awareness campaign, and maximizing the usage of SDGs, so 13, 17, 11, 14, 15, 12, 7, 6, and 4. I'm bad with my SDG numbers, so I don't quite know which SDGs he's referring to there. But I think it's the idea of government and people working together. Do any of you three want to comment on that? Or do you think, yeah?
I mean, I think that what we've been talking about covers that. I think that it's just like a summary of what we've been talking about. And yes, of course, that you can't see the government as a patron. I can't say the word patron. No, I can't say the word. But like as a paternal figure. I'm gonna say it like that. Like as a paternal figure, and expect them to do everything. And so it has to be, well, connected. It has to be the government and people working together, because at the end of the day, yes, the government works for us, but they, at the end of the day, they are still civilians, and they aren't perfect, and they don't know everything, and they can't do everything on their own. So yeah, so I think that awareness campaign of those SDGs are very important, as well as the awareness of all of the SDGs. Yeah.
So we've now got a question from Ayman. I might pronounce that wrong, apologies if I did. But they say that they would like to know how people can opt for climate restoration on a personal level, as well as motivating others to do the same. Do any of you have a response to that?
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
So I think opting for climate restoration at a personal level, I think the most important thing that any individual can do is start the discussion. So take what you know, maybe do some more research if you're interested, and talk to anyone you know. Start the discussion with anyone. If you're that dedicated and really interested in it, maybe consider joining a movement, for example, Worldward, where you can have your voice heard and get it out there and talk with like-minded individuals. And I think having individuals join organizations means that we can spread this message really quickly and get as many people involved. And I think the most important thing is talk to people, find out more and spread what you know, because the more people we can get involved, the closer we are to achieving it.
I want to add something.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was just going to quickly, and I'll go to you, Paula.
Yeah.
Just say Hannah spoke about joining a movement. If any of you want to join Worldward, I'm putting the sign up link in the chat, so you can all sign up for that if you would like to join. Now I'm moving on to asking Paula.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add that would be like the first step. I think that the second step would be starting to do different, more tangible things. I think that simply showing people that you're doing things will create like this new normalization of reality. So for example, I can go to school, use this, okay, so use it's a water bottle. So if you start seeing everyone using different water bottles and say you could, I don't know, for example, you really like my water bottle. Oh, where did you get it? Oh, I got it from here. And then that starts conversation. But it's also normalizing the fact that you use a water bottle instead of buying plastic water bottles. Or you can be using bamboo toothbrushes. So I think that it's not only with these little I have solar panels in my house. Like, oh really? Where did you get it from? I didn't know. I think that being like the motivate others, because it's like saying, oh yeah, it's actually possible. It's not just things that happen on the news. It's actual things that you can do personally.
So that seems to be two different but potentially complementary visions of how individuals can help do it, either by doing personal actions, which although they might not have a huge impact in of themselves, the message they send can, or engaging in some sort of kind of organizational and political action. Can you all still hear me? I've clearly disconnected. Okay. I think I've disconnected, so I'm going to just check my Wi-Fi. Okay, I've reconnected again. So yeah, okay. I'm going to now move on to the next audience question, which is, oh, and that's currently it with the audience questions. If anyone else has any more questions, please keep them coming. We'll give it another kind of, if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to ask. Okay then, I'll give, okay, so we've got a question saying, I'm not sure, Ramina, I might be pronouncing that really wrong. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names. And just talking about being a climate change ambassador and doing YouTube videos on kitchen gardens and planting fruit trees, and how that can create a difference, because others can do the same. I guess that's just backing up Paula's point. I'd also say from a personal perspective, I'd say that there's something to be said for both sides. We have to be doing things on a small, tangible level, but we also have to be recognizing that, for example, 5% of global emissions come from concrete. And so we also have to do things on a big structural level. And restoration is so huge that, yeah, planting trees in our communities is so important. And action we can do as individuals, but also action that we can have as part of a broader movement. Because for restoration to be carried out, in my opinion, I think we need also societal change as well. and large funding from governments and businesses and everyone working together. So we might have some more questions in the chat. How would you advise we go about educating ourselves further on climate change? Just quickly from someone else, Ray, she said that checking the Worldward website may be a way of doing that. Does anyone else have any thoughts on how to educate yourselves on climate change?
Well, I can I think that there are always different opportunities online. So I think that reading different articles and going to different conferences, going to different YouTube channels. Personally, what I try to do is that I think about my most used social media, or the ones that I use the most, and then start following people that talk about these aspects. So for example, the one I use the most is Instagram. So I start following CNN Climate and different ambassadors, different companies, not only people who talk about these aspects and these technologies, but also willing to change, or their different innovations, or their different projects, or their different companies. So yeah, so it could be through you actually looking for these different conferences, or following these people, which will actually fit the fact of the first you
We lost it.
yes, we have. But yes, no.
Okay, I'm gonna your last point and just say, when I was doing just research or presenting today, so many resources. There's so many documents and online, and there is so much that's free and you can access at any time. So just, if you're interested, just have a search, and it is out there and it doesn't take long to find.
Yeah, and there are also different courses too.
I think just to add to that, it's amazing to become more aware of climate change and the effects of it, but it's clever to be careful about your own mental health. I know for me personally, always searching about climate change and these things can leave me feeling quite hopeless, because there is so much going on and so much damage already. I think whatever you do look at, just always remember that there is hope. There is people trying to make a difference, and for all the resources that you do see about the climate going to pieces, I mean, maybe try and look at just as many things as people trying to make a difference for the climate.
Yeah.
And I think for me, on the topic of kind of hope, that's one of the reasons for me restoration is so important, because look, if we're just wanting to achieve net zero, then for many people it is hopeless. But I think that restoration provides us a way to actually help reverse the damage we've done. Just another quick thing, if anyone also wants to come volunteer for Worldward, we do provide a volunteer training program where we give you also a lot of climate education as well. We just had a question on the chat. Does the website have a page that contains links to different resources, just so we know who to listen to? So that's in the works at the moment, and we should get something up of that sort in the next 2 weeks on our website. Similarly, if you do want it in advance, please just send us an email. Our email address is also on our website, and we will provide those to you by email, those links to websites. Do we have any more questions in the chat from the audience? I think we're going to have time for one more before we let the speakers move on to their final question. All right, that's totally fine. So we decided that we wanted to end this webinar on a positive note and a message of hope. So my question to the speakers now is, we've asked each one of them to come up with one example of a climate action and climate restoration projects going on somewhere in the world. So I'll start with Reese for his answer.
I think I kind of touched on this already earlier, but there's lots of tree planting organizations in Africa that are doing lots of amazing work. They're involving a lot of youth and a lot of rural communities, because tree planting is something that everyone can do. And it really can be a community project, and it does help the carbon footprint on Earth, and it does help recover ecosystems. Yeah. I think that's a simple example, but it's very cheerful and happy.
Thank you. Also, if anyone wants to find out more about tree planting and the positive and negative carbon impacts of that, you can also have a look at that, which that is actually one of the resources we do have on our website as well. So I'm now going to ask Paula for her example.
So my example is called, it's a company that is in Mexico City called Conduce. So it's a play of word because it's like eco and then e and then conduce means to drive. But so it's basically a company that rents electric scooters all over the city. So they're like little scooter motorbike type things, and they are electric. Well, yeah, they don't use gasoline. There are electric scooters, and you don't have to pay for a parking for you have a specific parking station. Well, you have various ones all over the city. You don't have to pay for parking, and something that's really cool is that you don't, like, your membership is on your phone. So basically, you open the app and your phone is your key in order to start making this scooter go, like, yeah. And something that I find that is really cool also is that you can rent this scooter for personal uses, and there are different like packages, but it's also available for delivery services. So like Uber Eats and restaurants, and one with that's basically Uber Eats here in Mexico called Rappi. And so basically you can rent them for your services, and well, it's easier. You don't have to pay for any like of the maintenance. You have it basically 24/7 if you want to. And it's also really cool because you can oh yeah, it has like a little compartment for your pizzas or for your food. And there was also another point, but I just forgot it. but yeah, I think that it's very cool because, oh yeah, the traffic aspect. So in Mexico, in Mexico City specifically, traffic is unthinkable. Like, you have done half an hour to do one block, and I only did that because my aunt is sick, so she can't walk, and it's horrible. So with a scooter, you can like move through lanes easier and be on your, well, to your destination faster. For example, like Domino's, that has this half an hour policy, would be much easier with like a motorbike or a scooter, which they already use. But now if they use the electric ones, well, they're healthier for the environment. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for showing that's a really cool example of something that's dealing with the cutting emissions side of restoration, because fundamentally restoration isn't just about removals. We also have to cut emissions to zero as soon as possible. So that's really fascinating. And for the final one, Hannah, can you give me an example of a restoration project you've kind of recently?
I'm going to share my screen because I've got a diagram. I chose this one, which, if it will load, I will share with you. So this is a company called, not that one, called Climeworks, and they use a technique called direct air capture, where they basically have giant fans where the air passes through them, binds to a filter, the CO2 binds to the filter, and the CO2 can then be collected and stored either underground, or it can be used for negative emissions technologies, meaning that we're easily removing the CO2. Obviously, there are problems with this technology. However, it just goes to show that although restoration may seem so distant, there are companies already taking the first steps, and they are using these techniques, and they are proven to work. So don't let anything saying that restoration's impossible get to you, because it's shown that we can remove carbon from the atmosphere.
Thank you very, very, very much. And now I think I really like those 3 projects that you've shown, because we've got one project which was mitigating, cutting emissions, one project which is tree planting, which is both removals, although more temporary removals, but still removals nonetheless, and also adapting to the climate crisis as well. And then one which is pure removals as well. So it really shows the breadth of technologies and projects that can be and need to be used to achieve restoration. So I just want to thank all 3 of the panelists who this is their first webinar. Most of them haven't been volunteers for Worldward for too long, but all I think have been fantastically, spoken utterly fantastically, and have been really, really brilliant at what they've done. So thank you all very, very much. And I'm just going to end off by just briefly saying thank you all for coming as well to this webinar. We're probably going to be hoping to do these about once every week, probably once every 2 weeks. The recording of this will go up on YouTube if you missed anything. Also, if you'd like to get more involved in Worldward or join, please do check out our website, which we're going to put in the, we've already put the sign up link in the chat, but I'll put up the general website in the chat as well. And the final thing is, for those of you who are interested, I'm going to, there's a Google form that you can fill out. It's not much on it, but you can fill it out. And once you fill that out, you can get a certificate of attendance to this webinar. And if you'd like for us to contact you about anything else as well, please do send us your emails, and we can keep you in the loop, as well as if you'd like to volunteer for us, come to that. And on that note, I'd just like to once again thank all 3 fantastic panelists who I really thought have been brilliant and really, really fascinating and wonderful webinar. And I'm going to leave the webinar on for just a couple more seconds if anyone wants to look at the forms or wants to look at the website, but please do keep in contact with us, and if you've been interested in what you learn, please do either drop us an email just to say you're interested and would like to be kept in the loop, or if you'd like to join, please do feel free for that too. Thank you all very, very much, and I think now I've given you enough time to look at those links. So this has been a fantastic turnout, and hopefully see you all in about 2 weeks. Stay safe. Goodbye.